What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Damage Report with Francesca Fiorentini, the evil step mother dragon, or the MILF dragon, or whatever you want to call me. I'm here. What's up? We're gonna have a great Friday. We've got so much to talk about, and with me, the host of the Hysteria podcast, Erin Ryan.
Hello. Good to see you.
I couldn't imagine anyone I'd rather do this show with. Don't tell anybody else who does this show.
They won't find out either.
Yeah, no.
How would they know?
They don't watch this thing. Are you kidding me? John is on vacation, of course, and I'm gonna say I want to get to 1 million subscribers by the time he comes back. We're hovering around 750,000 on YouTube. That's enough time, right, guys? So if you're here on YouTube, God damn it, like and share the stream right now. Let people know what you're watching, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We're gonna be doing super chats. We're gonna be reading your comments as we talk about trouble in Trump world, as we talk about Ted Cruz once again, his favorite kink getting owned. It happens. Tucker Carlson going full fash, but then of course something to brighten up our Friday, which is the children's mullet competition. We all need to see these photos to cleanse our timelines and our brains and have a good weekend. So with that, Erin, are you ready to get into some news?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do this. So there's a little bit of trouble in Trump world, because of course there is. Alan Weisselberg, Trump's chief financial officer and one of his most trusted executives who's not currently in prison or had to be pardoned for being in prison or a foreign agent. Anyway, that guy turns out, he might be going to jail because he pled guilty to more than a dozen felonies, including criminal tax fraud and grand larceny. That's right. So prosecutors are charging the Trump organization, again, he was the head of, and Weisselberg in July 2021 with scheming to defraud tax fraud and falsifying business records for awarding off the books perks to senior executives. Weisselberg was accused of concealing and avoiding taxes on $1.76 million of income. This included rent for a Manhattan apartment, lease payments for 2 Mercedes-Benz vehicles, and tuition for relatives, with Trump signing the tuition checks. So these are the charges that have been brought by Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, which some have said are a little too light, but let's get into more details. So under this plea deal, Weisselberg has to pay $2 million in taxes. He must also point the finger at his longtime employer, the Trump organization, not Donald Trump himself. That means he has to testify against the Trump organization at its trial in October. In exchange, Weisselberg, who is facing years in prison, is likely to receive a 5-month jail sentence with time credited for good behavior. He might serve as little as 100 days, because that's how white collar crime be in the United States of America. That being said, he is gonna be on Rikers Island, Rikers prison, or jail, excuse me, which we all know needs to be shut down, except for when it comes to Trump organization associates, in which case keep it open just for them. So interestingly, there's not going to be a testimony against Trump himself, and yet he was doing all of this at the behest of Donald Trump. So Erin, I wanted your take on what this means, how devastating you think it could be for the organization, and what it could lead to.
Oh geez, well those are some big question marks. What it should
take them in order.
What it should lead to, what this means is that Donald Trump is in trouble, or his organization is in trouble. He has been perpetually in trouble for the entirety of his public career. There has never been a time when he has not been in trouble. Maybe like season 1 or 2 of The Apprentice, he was not like publicly in trouble. He was privately in some trouble. So he's in trouble again. But will he actually face any consequences as a result of the actions that led to the trouble is a big question mark. I think that I don't understand how a person with such a long track record of throwing people under the bus gets people to be so loyal to him.
Yeah.
I don't believe that Weisselberg, if the situation were reversed and Trump had information that could implicate Weisselberg and get him a lighter sentence, I do not believe for a second that Trump wouldn't take advantage of that and leak like a sieve. But when the opposite happens, it's crazy how many of his associates are just willing to go to the mat for him, and it's baffling. I truly don't get it. It's a type of dark magic that I don't think I'll ever understand.
Yeah, and it takes in a certain amount of dark magic and criminality to pull off this amount of crime, financial crime, for the Trump organization over years and years and years. I'm gonna give him some credit here, right? It's not super easy to do that, and you kind of see that because Weisselberg wasn't necessarily handling the fraudulent claims that Trump won the 2020 election. He was over in the financial world. I'm gonna guess if they had someone smarter on that whole BS, they might have got something done. They might have actually had any kind of, evidence to the fact that there was fraud, because there was not. And you don't put Sidney Powell and whatever, Rudy Giuliani, flatulent Giuliani, just up there with Jenna Ellsberg, people we've never heard of, right? So Weisselberg, again, this is a dude who has been there by Trump's side since before Trump was running for president. He's been helping him get away with defrauding everyone effectively, and also getting away with their own, gifting, apartments and Mercedes-Benz and whatever, and getting away with their own stuff. But like Michael Cohen, the only person who is effectively so-called flipped on Donald Trump, it's you at some point it's gonna come for you, and it's gonna be the financial angle, like all mob bosses and mob organizations. And I don't know, I'm curious to see what Weisselberg will say. I'm curious to see the line of questioning. Of course, if you're not even allowed to say the words Donald Trump, or if you have to be like El Jefe, was in, it feels like it's a little bit of a dead end. He's gonna serve his 5 months, and we're all just gonna have to move on. Maybe the Trump organization won't, will lose its ability to exist.
Yeah, this whole debacle, and maybe I'm a cynic, but a big takeaway that I've had from watching Donald Trump in the public eye run away from trouble is that if you're rich enough and you have a strategy that is a time-wasting strategy, you can drag your feet for years and years and years and years. Like some of these crimes that we're talking about Weisselberg being involved in happened a long time ago. And you can just gum up the courts. You can slow things down. You can have lawyers that are willing to throw all the spaghetti at the refrigerator, so to speak. And you can slow it down enough that you basically outlive justice. And that seems like what is kind of happening right now. And I would love to see Weisselberg and other affiliates of the Trump organization and the Trump organization itself be punished for the fact that it's essentially an organization that exists to skirt responsibility for paying taxes and this is allegedly launder money.
Right.
But I don't have faith that the legal system is nimble enough to keep up with lawyers whose aim is to slow things down so much that nobody ever gets in trouble.
Right, and to make these plea deals, right? Why not go after the big fish? Why not build a case? Why not use him? I mean, we've seen, who knows, TBD on the January 6th, committee and commission investigations, but all roads lead to Trump. And so it's interesting that on some of the more gettable stuff, because apparently, trying to overturn a Democratic election, not gettable. They seem to be sort of balking, right? In this case. But I do want to mention, in case there's any right wingers out there who are like, but Weisselberg, he didn't even know him. That's just one out of so many wonderful Trump associates. Let's look at Trump associates who have actually been charged with crimes. You got Steve Bannon, Tom Barrack, Elliot Broidy, Michael Cohen, Michael Flynn, Rick Gates, Paul Manafort, George Nader, also a pedophile, George Papadopoulos, not a pedophile, but probably, Roger Stone, definitely. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna add whether or not they're a pedophile. And then you've got Alan Weisselberg. So he's joining a very long list, some of whom have received pardons, some of whom haven't received pardons, some of whom have served some amount of time. Paul Manafort was also in Rikers, and he had the gout, which I guess I only thought happened to like kings in the 12th century. But anyway, he's joining a long list. So you wonder at what point are we going after the big fish? What point are we going after the kingpin? Or is he just going to continually hire new folks? I mean, people running his PACs right now, again, that are swindling folks, especially since the raid on Mar-a-Lago, like swindling people out of millions of dollars every single day. Mm-hmm. You know, what's gonna happen with that? There's a couple of lawsuits I know that for folks who are like, I didn't sign up to send $100,000 a month to the Make America Great Again PAC. I don't know.
Yeah, something that's really, I mean, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but something that I read about Trump raising money off of his legal problems, because of course he is. He raises money off everything. I was reading something about how in the days after the 2020 election, which Trump lost, and he was saying that, we're gonna fix this. We're gonna fix this. One of the jobs that was held by the most number of people who gave to that effort was on disability. So it's not like these people that Donald Trump is targeting are like a speedboat salesman from suburban Dayton that owns 6 McMansions. These are people that are that really don't have anything to give, and he asks them to give even more, and they're doing it. And it's really, really, it's exploitative and gross and upsetting. And it's one thing that's really interesting to me about this whole thing is you have people like Alan Weisselberg. Basically, if you ask somebody from a red state to draw a cartoon of what they think rich people in New York are like, they would look like the list of the 11 people that you shared with me, the people that have gotten in trouble, that are in Donald Trump's orbit. These are the people that people in rural red states find not to be relatable to them at all, and yet they're willing to just completely give everything in support of keeping them out of trouble. And it's really deeply puzzling, and I truly don't get it.
Some people like their little house of cards and lies, and it's like, but it's my house of cards. It's my special one.
I want there to not be 12 people on that list, so that there is, because I feel like if there were 12 people who had gone down in service of Donald Trump, then we get to like Jesus comparison territory, and I feel like the QAnon message boards would just light up, and I do not have the stomach for that. Not this year.
We'll get there. I mean, Rudy in Georgia, things are not looking good.
I hope there's 2 at once, so we go from 11 to 13. Like we skip the 12, like it's we're skipping the 13th floor in an elevator.
Got it. No disciple references. I love it. There's a new excuse that's come around, then the Trump world is now trying to float. Let's take a look.
Really, if you look at the Espionage Act, it's not really about taking the documents. It's about destroying them or hiding them or giving them to the enemy.
Right.
It's not about taking them and putting them in a place that's roughly as safe as they were in the first place.
Roughly as safe as they were in the first place. That's Rudy Giuliani, disgraced lawyer, and again, man who gets paid in Kirkland whiskey, speaking to Newsmax and parroting this line that effectively the documents were just as safe. Now let's just address the first thing that he said, though, the Espionage Act. It's not about taking documents, it's about sharing them. Actually, it's not. George Conway on Twitter is sort of fact checking him on that, says he obviously didn't read the Espionage Act, which prohibits willfully retaining sensitive national defense information and failing to deliver it to the officer or employee of the United States entitled to receive it. Doesn't stipulate that you have to be doing something with it. And of course, we know that there was a subpoena for these documents 2 months before the raid. And before the subpoena, a request, I'm assuming. So he saw this coming, they all saw it coming. But it wasn't just Rudy who was offering that like they were safer at Mar-a-Lago defense. Take a look at this.
Was there a limited number of people who had access to that storage room? It seems like a pretty important room, right? Since they've made such a big deal of it and have the lock on it and so forth. So were there a limited number of people who could go in and out?
Yes, absolutely.
Or have access to it?
Certainly Mar-a-Lago is secure in and of itself. Just getting onto the compound is hard. And then it was a locked door, and getting, back down into the basement, there's security. You can't just walk down there. Only certain members of staff can get there, and then there's only one key. So yes, it's a very limited number of people that have access down there. And it was enough to where President Trump believed, or our team believed, that it was secure enough. They asked for one more lock, add another lock, which we did. And then for whatever reason, they decided that they still needed to raid the place.
Yeah, there's just one key, and it's in a dog's mouth, and it's swinging there. And like in Pirates of the Caribbean, and there's a bunch of like dudes just like whistling, trying to get it over. That's exactly how I imagine it, and I feel like it's probably as safe as that. That's former Trump lawyer Christina Bobb explaining that there was only one key. It was super safe. In fact, the facility, the document facility, as described by News Nation, was a quote storage room off of an interior hallway near the pool with boxes everywhere, next to the chlorine and the floaties and all the things that you need by a pool. So, Erin, what do you make of this? That like they were safe? God.
Oh, gosh. It's such a ridiculous claim that it almost is a waste of energy to respond to it. I used to live in a building in New York City that had these downstairs storage lockers, and everybody had super hardcore padlocks on the storage lockers. People would put like bikes or holiday decorations and stuff. And in my building in New York, somebody broke in with bolt cutters. Pretty easy. A bunch of bikes got stolen. It happened over the course of like an hour one random afternoon. Like that was ostensibly, picking locks is something that people do all the time. Breaking and entering is something people do all the time. Who had the key? Who had the one key? Okay, there was one key. Who had it? Where was it? Like that, I feel like that's important information, because if it was in fact tied on the collar of a dog that was susceptible to being bribed with snacks, that's a different security issue than having it put in like a second safe that had like a fingerprint lock or something like that.
No, it is incredibly vague. Like if you're going to be specific that this was better than, the actual National Archives security or the US government security, then get specific about what that security is versus what your security is, which again is a cartoon police officer blowing a feather up and down with his snoring as it jangles from his side.
But also the National Archives, like Laura Ingraham, first of all, her questions, lack of follow-up questions is comically inept. I'm sure she knows what the National Archives are like. There is the case that holds the Constitution or a copy of the Declaration of Independence. They have a security system where if somebody were to break in, there's like really, really super thick glass. And if someone were to break in, the documents drop like into a vault. Like, I don't think a little storage room by a swimming pool had like that many layers of glass and some sort of fail safe in case somebody breaks in. And Laura Ingraham was just like, yeah, of course, one key, that's fine. That's fine.
All right.
It's ridiculous. It's like,
thanks
Laura,
for clarifying.
Come on, you didn't just fall off a turnip truck, Laura. You went to Dartmouth. Come on. But I think the fact that Fox News hosts routinely don't kind of tip their hand and show that they know how the world works is a real reflection of their low opinion of their viewers. They really think that their viewers are that uncultured.
Well, and she asks sort of hard questions like, so who had the key, or there was one key, but then she just kind of like furrows her brow and moves along. I see. As I suspected, there is no answer. Okay, just for clarity, there are certain types of documents, especially the highly sensitive files that were sought at Mar-a-Lago. that require extremely rigorous security measures, more than a lock and limited access to certain members of staff. Some may even require what's known as a sensitive compartmented information facility, or a SCIF, which I don't know if that's what Erin's talking. I don't know if that's where the Declaration of Independence is. That's what drops down. It seems like maybe that's the next level up. But again, not all these documents were necessarily classified. They just did not belong at Mar-a-Lago. And I wanted to give you some context for how secure Mar-a-Lago is. Let's remember, not that secure. In fact, there have been a number of breaches. Here's one, late 2019, a Chinese tourist named Lu Jing wandered onto Mar-a-Lago to take pictures. She was arrested for trespassing, but was acquitted on the charge that after her lawyers pointed out that the club did not have a no trespassing sign and that the entrance she accessed wasn't guarded. Her trial revealed various details about security at Mar-a-Lago, including the location of several security cameras, the total size of the club's security staff, 13 guards, its apparent lack of a secure perimeter, and the fact that staffers maintain daily lists of members and approved guests on digital tablet devices. So you can imagine, you could probably mess with those. Another happens to be Chinese businesswoman, Yujing Zhang, entered Mar-a-Lago from the front, saying she was there for a charity event that she knew had been canceled. She was convicted of trespassing, although no espionage charges were brought against her, despite speculation that she was a foreign agent. Mike Tyson apparently got into Mar-a-Lago without identification, although look at him, it's Mike Tyson. Here's my favorite breach of security that happened at Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure there have been a lot, but one of the members, Richard DeGazio, posted a photo to Facebook identifying the Trump aide who carries the so-called nuclear football, the briefcase that serves as a mobile command center from which the president can launch a nuclear attack. Oh, here's his Facebook post. You guys remember this? And he's bestowing praise on the guy who carries the football. Hey, this is Rick, the nuclear football, also known as the atomic football. Rick is the man. Sign off. Do we think Mar-a-Lago is a safe place?
No. And also, you bring up an important point. Donald Trump is so thirsty to be famous and to hang out around famous people that you could have probably, if you were a foreign entity that wanted to spy on Mar-a-Lago, you could just probably pretend to give him some sort of entertainment award. Be like, here's an Emmy that they meant to give you for The Apprentice. We're sneaking it in. Why is the Emmy shaped like a small video camera? Don't worry about it. This is how Emmys look now. Why would he know what an Emmy looks like? He's never actually won one. So that would be an easy way for people to spy on him or have access to him.
It's harder to sneak into the Vanity Fair Oscars party than it is to Mar-a-Lago. That party, I've read about it. The only two people that ever snuck into that party, this is random, but one hid in a porta potty for like 8 hours. The other brought a pig that they said was Babe. And we're like, this is the Babe pig. And then they got let in. And I think that's fantastic.
That's hilarious. I think they should be allowed to go to every single Vanity Fair Oscars party as a result of that.
Meanwhile, you could bring like an ostrich into Mar-a-Lago and be like, hey, it's the pig from Babe. And they'd be like, oh, okay, looks a little different. Come right in.
Sure, camera adds 10 pounds. Wow, you look great, pig from Babe. It also is really funny the fact that somebody broke into Mar-a-Lago and was like, there wasn't a no trespassing sign. It kind of reminds me of the way that the president and a lot of people in his orbit try to conduct themselves with like Airbud rules. Like, well, there's no rule a dog can't play basketball. Like, there's no rule that the state legislators can't overturn the results of the elections. It's really astounding. I would say Airbud level legal analysis there.
Yes, let's make some new laws. Put up no trespassing and don't sell those documents. If he already has, he's definitely sold.
Do make a rule that dogs aren't allowed to access classified documents, because otherwise that would be the next move. We would have like a bunch of golden receivers going into Mar-a-Lago and sniffing out nuclear secrets, which
Bud swallowed those a long time ago.
Oh no, Spy Bud.
Airbud swallowed those. Oh, he's got him. He's got goggles on. That's how you know it's safe. Anyway, we have to take a break. Our first break, but a lot more news. Stay tuned. So let's do this. Turns out Louisiana's Attorney General is holding flood money for the city of New Orleans hostage until the city enforces the state's total abortion ban. Yeah, that was just a headline from hell, isn't it? Just leading with that. Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry successfully urged the Louisiana Bond Commission on Thursday to delay $39 million of future credit for New Orleans sewerage and water board, which the city needs for its flood response, until the city officials agree to enforce the state's abortion ban, which is awful. The move, of course, comes right at the start of hurricane season. On the same day, New Orleans has issued a flood advisory. Remember, we're like, whatever it is, however many years out from Hurricane Katrina, happened on August 25th, 2005. This is hurricane season, y'all. This is hurricane season, and that is insanely dangerous to do this. The financing that's being held hostage would specifically be used to build a power station for the sewerage and water board to help combat flooding. Melinda Deslat, a research director at Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, live tweeted today's meeting in which Republican politicians decided to punish New Orleans, a Democratic stronghold in the state, for defending abortion rights in the wake of a near total ban. Fun, that's great. So they need this money. This is important for the city to protect itself from hurricanes, which are getting worse and worse every year. But why are they so mad at New Orleans and city officials and folks who are there? Why is this happening? Well, it turns out that actually New Orleans has been standing up to its own state's abortion ban. And this is something that I hadn't heard and something we should all be paying attention to, which is that they're refusing to comply. So the New Orleans City Council passed a resolution unanimously that would prevent city entities from enforcing Louisiana's abortion trigger laws. The resolution calls for no city funds to be used to catalog or report abortion cases. The resolution also calls for no penalties against abortion doctors or patients. That's not all. What about the police department? Well, turns out, even though in 2005, the NOLA Police Department, terrible entity, horrible, seems like they're making up for it today because the New Orleans Police Department will not enforce Louisiana's law, banning and criminalizing most abortions. Officers will not issue summons, make arrests, or otherwise enforce violations related to state laws prohibiting abortion, a police department statement says. The city of New Orleans recognizes the reproductive rights, this is from the resolution, and human rights, embraces the tenets of equality, dignity, autonomy, access to critical healthcare information, bodily integrity, and respect for private life with the highest attainable standard of health, including sexual and reproductive health without discrimination, as well as the right to freedom from cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. And that is from that New Orleans City Council resolution. It is a fascinating clash between city and state officials, and also for me, a roadmap for where other red states, cities in red states, can go when it comes to pushing back against their own state's abortion bans. Erin, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my first question reading this story and looking into it was how much of the state's total revenue comes from New Orleans? Like, is it cutting off its nose to spite its face? Because I believe that the state making New Orleans more likely to suffer from terrible flooding really could end up hurting the state overall. I mean, I don't have numbers in front of me, but judging by how much revenue cities generate versus places where there aren't people and commerce, et cetera, and the huge size of tourism and in New Orleans and the huge amount of tax revenue generated by all of the commerce activity in the city, seems like a bad idea. Seems like some really stupid posturing without a lot of foresight. And at the end, everybody is going to end up worse off and nobody will have gotten what they wanted. So, right. I mean, is that really a good strategy when it comes to governing a state that has a diverse population, both ideologically and socioeconomically? Probably not. Probably not. This seems like a really, really bad idea. And it sort of reminds me of, sometimes you see, red state chatter about how terrible California is and how California should secede and become its own country. It's like, okay, you want to know what that would look like?
Yeah.
Okay. It's I think there's just a complete lack of foresight in favor of just projecting this air of toughness and preserving one's pride. And I don't think it's going to turn out well for anybody involved.
No, and I mean, what's interesting more broadly about the abortion rights, I mean, the fact that Roe v. Wade has been overturned and the in my opinion, the false argument that this belongs to the states is that what happens when you do that is you create a fractious nation and friction with inside states themselves, right? Depending, so it's like county versus county now. I'm just glad that they're actually pushing back, but here you have flood money, $39 million being upheld or withheld until they comply. And for a city like New Orleans, I can imagine that is gonna sway a lot of people, maybe Republican city council members, maybe Democrats who are like, look, I agree in in theory that we should be standing on the side of reproductive rights, but we need this hurricane money. And if heaven forbid there is another, whatever, category 4 or 5 horrible hurricane, which there will be something this season. Maybe it won't, claim the amount of lives that Hurricane Katrina did. Very quickly, those folks are gonna be needing that money. So I think it's insanely dangerous and insane how Louisianans are being pitted against one another. I just want to go to the state senator, Jimmy Harris, who is a Democrat from New Orleans, who's pointing out that in the meeting that when the bond commission first delayed these funds in July, there was actual flood water in the streets. The power plan, he said, is expected to protect an estimated 384,000 people. So again, this is much needed aid, and like everything Republicans do, they're upholding it not for the benefit of the people, but for their ideological lines to punish folks and say, oh, you don't like this, hey, we're not gonna vote for our vets bill that we voted for a few months ago. Remember that, causing Jon Stewart to flip out, rightfully so. They're like, no, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it anymore because we can't take this loss/win this week. Republicans all got on board with that. They eventually did sign that, the agreement, but it's the same thing. They will uphold money in order to try and cajole others and to hold them hostage.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is I think right after Dobbs came down on June 24th, there was some talk about like, oh, we're Republicans, the dog that caught the car. And it does seem, we don't know for sure. We know that the effects on real people's lives have been devastating. There is a woman in Louisiana who is being forced to carry to term a completely non-viable fetus. She must go out of state in order to get the health care that she needs because the state's new abortion ban is draconian. But there are states right now where there are signs that voters won't take this. Kansas, for example, I don't like to extrapolate national implications from just, a Great Plains state that just had like an off-year election. Kansas just had record turnout for a primary because it put abortion up to a vote. And people in Kansas weren't cool with that. Kind of preliminary data we have on voter registration in other states that are purple to leaning red, like Wisconsin and Michigan, are showing women are out registering men to vote in those states. In places where abortion is not on the ballot, it's about even keel. So I think that in places like Louisiana, the immediate harm that is done to the people that live in Louisiana cannot be understated. But the long-term harm that Republicans and conservatives are doing to their aspirations of holding on to power, I feel like that's something that's coming down the pike. And when it gets here, they're not gonna like it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is insane. You've got a woman who's got an unviable fetus. She can't get an abortion. What happens if she dies in a flood then? Like, I mean, this is the same kind of, we're putting her at risk anyway.
Right.
We're putting all the people, everyone at risk.
What's more pro-life than drowning a pregnant woman, you know?
Hey, just to prove a point.
Yeah.
Republicans will go there.
Exactly.
More to get to on this beautiful Friday. It's so good, except this, I hope this doesn't, you need to watch the rest of the show because it's gonna leave a bad taste. Let's go into this. So Utah is digging into the records of kindergartners to see if they could be transgender. Yeah, that's right. A Utah school investigated a high school athlete, digging into her records back to kindergarten after she defeated 2 other girls and their parents then questioned whether she was transgender. So again, the sleuthing is because parents are mad that their daughter was beaten in a sport by another kid, right? Who they're now claiming must be transgender because my daughter's not gonna lose. And so if this is a girls' team, I call transgender. Let's send out the sleuths. Insanity, y'all. So this came to light, this had happened because there was a hearing in front of Utah lawmakers about the transgender ban on sports, basically, that they passed in July. So this is the High School Activities Association spokesperson, David Spatafore. He said the investigation came after the parents of the 2nd and 3rd place finishers filed a complaint with the UHSAA, again, Utah High School Activities Association, which oversees high school sports in the state. The girls won 1st place in a competition last year by a wide margin, Spatafore said during a legislative hearing Wednesday on transgender athletes. He used the example to show lawmakers that the association has responded to and investigated complaints regarding transgender athletes and that it intends to follow the new law now banning them from playing on girls' sports teams in Utah schools. Now, the association apparently gets a lot of complaints from angry, overbearing helicopter parents who also are bigots. They get complaints, this is according to Spatafore, when, quote, an athlete doesn't look feminine enough, adding that it looks into each one. In this case, the school did an initial review of the winning student's high school record and saw she was registered as a female student. Spatafore then said the UHSAA was instructed to dig further to double check. School officials called her middle school and elementary school to look at her file, he noted. The school went back to kindergarten and said she's always been a female. If someone's been a female since kindergarten, he added, it's likely they didn't transition genders. Thank you, head of athletics for high schools in Utah, for telling me who is and who is not transgender. I can't wrap my mind around the petty bigotry of a parent who's like, oh, you looked into the high school records? No. I want you to look into elementary school records and kindergarten records. You got to keep going and just calling and freaking out about this. Now, there's a reason I haven't said what the sport is or the name of this student or like what she won in, because that's all been protected for her identity, apparently. In fact, this is the last thing before I kick it to you, Erin. Spatafore said the student and her family weren't told about the investigation because it might be offensive or embarrassing that someone thought the girl was transgender. He said she wasn't told to protect her. The parents would have been involved if needed, Spatafore said, but he felt the school was able to clear up concerns by looking at her records instead. So that's all fine. None the wiser.
Oh my God, they are so creepy, Francesca. Like, I can think of nothing, there is no word to better describe this sort of investigation, the type of entitlement the parents felt to inquire about a kid's genitals. Because if this girl won a high school competition, she's a child, she's legally a child. So they are so obsessed with a child's genitals that they required multiple school staffs to investigate what those genitalia were, like, good Lord, incredibly creepy. Also, it speaks to a complete provincialism by the parents, because here's the thing, super great athletes seem superhuman to compete against. There was a girl, I'm from a really small town in northern Wisconsin, and there was a girl in a rival high school. Who was like, she ended up being on the US hockey team, the US women's hockey team.
Wow, nice.
3 times. And nicest person in the world. She went out for cross country, waxed everybody her freshman year. She was just so much better than everybody else. In basketball, whenever I had to guard her, it was like, well, great, I'm gonna get my butt kicked. Like, she was so much better at all the sports than everybody. Great athletes really leave people in the dust, and like, gender and their sexual identity has nothing to do with it. And I hate to break it to these parents and to anybody who would look at a great female athlete as somehow suspicious. I hate to break it to you, but that's what great athletes are. They're that much better than regular people. And I'm sorry that your daughters had to learn that they were normal in such a disturbing way, but sometimes you're just normal and some people are exceptional compared to you. And that's just, them's the breaks,
It's so true, and it points to the hypocrisy. Let's set aside how heinous it is to prevent transgender students and youth in Utah, of which there seem to be 4.
Yeah.
4 students who are trans and would like to play on the teams of their gender identity. But the fact is that this is all under the guise of, we got to protect women's sports, when you've got in practice parents who are like, nah, girls aren't that good. That can't be a girl. That's gotta be a guy. You love women's sports.
None of these people would go to a WNBA game. They do not care about women's sports. Women's sports can be extremely exciting to watch. I love the NCAA tournament, the women's tournament. It's so fun. High level women's soccer, so fun. I have extreme doubts that these people are lining up to buy Angel City FC season tickets. They don't care about women's sports. They care about enforcing bigotry on people who just want to play.
Yes, and just a little more context about this. So the governor of Utah actually vetoed the trans ban on student athletes when it came up, and it was overridden by the state legislature. And he said, in response to this incident and this investigation, he said, "My goodness, we are living in a world where we become sore losers and we're looking for any reason why our kid lost. I have a real problem with that story. I just wish we could be a little more thoughtful in life and a little less critical of other people." And I kind of echoes, this is Governor Cox. It echoes his sentiment. And look, I'm sure he's probably Mormon. He probably doesn't believe in reproductive choice. He probably, all the things. We probably disagree on everything. But on this issue, it seems like he's leading with, I think, what we all need to lead with, which is our hearts and our empathy. So when that veto came down, he said something really honest and sort of echoes his sentiment that he just said recently. He says, "I must admit, I'm not an expert on transgenderism. I struggle to understand so much of it, and the science is conflicting. When in doubt, however, I always try to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion," he wrote. "I don't understand what they're going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live." If you take nothing away from any debate on whether trans people should be able to play on the teams of their gender identity, or whether they should have, I don't know, basic civil rights, or right now gender affirming care that's being vilified, just focus on that. You don't understand what they're going through. You don't know what it's like. All you want to do is you want them to live. Period. And it's all solved, and it all goes away, and it all becomes so clear. It's just insane to me that we lack that amount of basic compassion. One last thing on this. I did mention there was only a few transgender athletes who are in the state of Utah, but they are currently challenging the transgender ban. So currently 3 transgender girls who want to play as girls are challenging this ban in court. If a judge grants the injunction, then a commission will go into effect and will make decisions on which transgender girls can compete. This is where it gets a little gross. The members are set to evaluate a transgender player's wingspan, weight, and height, and whether a girl is taking hormone blockers to determine if she might have an unfair advantage according to the legislature's plan. So good on them for actually fighting this. Gets a little bit weird and gross when it comes to who can determine and how they determine whether or not they can play as their gender identity. This last story, oh God, this is a worst taste. Let's start with this.
In all, the EPA alone gets more than $40 billion in this bill, including more than $30 billion for so-called disadvantaged communities. What are those? Well, they're not really defined. People who vote for Joe Biden. So what it really means is the EPA is going to spread more identity politics and race hate. Are you sick of that yet?
That is Tucker Carlson actually addressing the historic climate change bill that was recently passed in Congress and signed by President Joe Biden. But he's addressing it in a very specific way. I think you heard the words race hate. That's right. Tucker Carlson is taking issue with a very particular stipulation in this unprecedented climate bill, which is that there's going to be money spent on most affected communities, which are disproportionately Black and brown Americans who live near, I don't know, toxic sites, paper mills, things like this. The White House estimates the law includes $60 billion in spending on so-called environmental justice. That includes money to reduce emissions around US ports, plant trees in city neighborhoods that are hotter because of past racist housing policies, making electric vehicles more affordable, and installing solar panels to make buildings more efficient in low-income neighborhoods. But that, of course, means it's racist against who? White people. Again, the thing that doesn't actually exist. So that is Tucker Carlson literally saying race hate, and it gets a little bit worse. Let's watch the rest of that clip.
The total annual budget of the EPA currently stands at about $10 billion. So this is a lot of money flowing to equity and the disadvantaged. And of course, everything hangs on definition. So who gets to define what disadvantaged is, a disadvantaged community? Well, that would be the EPA's administrator, a guy called Michael Regan. This is a guy who's in his late 40s who has never had an actual job in his life. He's never worked for real business of any kind. But he does have priorities, and to give you some sense of what they are, we'll tell you what he told The Daily Show this year, and we're quoting. Everything I do at EPA is through the lens of environmental justice. Contracting, procurement, air quality, water quality, land management starts with, are we protecting the least among us, those who have lacked political representation and those who have not been at the table for decades, end quote. So really, this is about spreading race hate, as virtually everything they do is. They call it equity. It's not about protecting the environment.
Again, race hate, straight up saying it. By the way, Michael Regan, current EPA head, is a Black man, and he was the head of North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality. He has had a job before, you racist POS. Erin, I wanna kick it to you, this idea that equity is racist.
Okay, so once again, the little Lord Fauntleroy of a fish sticks fortune is speaking in a way that is sort of misleading. So, I mean, here's the thing. I am not a legislator. I did not craft this legislation, but I do know that Joe Manchin of West Virginia was an essential part of getting this across the finish line, right? West Virginia is a state that is 93% white. West Virginia is a state that is also deeply impoverished. And a lot of people that would qualify as disadvantaged likely live in the borders of West Virginia. To say that being disadvantaged is, while it is disproportionately Black and brown people, just say that it's only Black and brown people to make that implication is, in my opinion, what makes Fox News run. This notion that the people that are disadvantaged are the other people, and anything that helps them is bad for America, ignores the fact that there are people who are not black and brown, white people, rural Americans, all across the country who could benefit from environmental justice initiatives. And it is extremely misleading, and I hate it, and it's very, very insidious.
Absolutely. We're breathing the same air at the end of the day. We're drinking from the same contaminated or not water sources. It is absolutely a ploy, an openly racist ploy to attract his white nationalist base even more. That does it for the first hour of the Damage Report. Of course, there is more on YouTube. There are more stories coming up, including the Mullet contest. So get on over there if you're watching on linear. See you there, and yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.